Hey everyone, Andrew here. I'm back with 3 encounters that'll make you question what's actually possible. Tonight's stories don't share a location or a theme. They share something more unsettling. They're all real experiences that broke the normal rules of reality. Different people, different places, different circumstances. But each one faced something that shouldn't exist according to everything we think we know. Identities masked for privacy. Narratives sharpened for clarity. But the core events? Untouched and exactly as they unfolded. Before we dive in, where are you listening from? And what does your clock say? Drop it in the comments. Knowing these stories are being heard across different places and time somehow makes them feel more real. The veil is thin tonight. Let's see what's on the other side. Story 1. The Interstate Rest Stop. I worked as a long-haul truck driver for 11 years, covering routes that crossed the Midwest and Great Plains. The job required consistent adherence to federal hours of service regulations, which mandated rest periods at specific intervals. Rest stops became familiar locations where I would park, sleep, and resume travel. In September of 2019, I was transporting freight from Omaha to Indianapolis along Interstate 80. The route was routine. I had driven it approximately 40 times over the previous 3 years. Weather conditions were clear with no reported construction delays. At approximately 11:30 p.m., I reached the mandated rest period and began searching for a suitable location to park. The next designated rest area appeared on my GPS approximately 18 miles ahead. I had stopped there before without incident. I arrived at the rest stop at 11:47 p.m. The facility consisted of a small building containing restrooms and vending machines, surrounded by a parking area with designated spaces for commercial vehicles. Lighting was provided by overhead fixtures positioned at regular intervals throughout the lot. Upon arrival, I observed 4 other commercial vehicles already parked. This was consistent with typical occupancy for that time of night. I selected a parking space near the perimeter, set my alarm for 6 a.m. and began my rest period. At approximately 2:15 a.m., I was awakened by my vehicle's air pressure alarm. This alarm activates when air pressure in the braking system drops below safe operational levels. I checked the gauge. Pressure had decreased from normal levels to approximately 40 psi, which was below the threshold required for safe vehicle operation. I exited the cab to inspect for potential air leaks. The night was quiet. No other vehicle engines were running. The overhead lights created distinct pools of illumination separated by areas of darkness. I walked around the vehicle checking airline connections and brake chambers. No visible leaks were detected. Pressure had stabilized at 40 psi without further decrease. During this inspection, I noticed something inconsistent with my arrival. The 4 commercial vehicles I had observed upon parking were no longer present. The parking lot was now empty except for my truck. I checked my phone for the time, 2:22 a.m. I had been asleep for approximately 2.5 hours. It was unusual for 4 trucks to depart simultaneously during standard rest periods without my hearing their engines start. I completed my external inspection and returned to the cab. Air pressure had returned to normal levels without intervention. No explanation for the pressure drop was evident. I attempted to resume sleep but felt increasingly alert. The parking lot remained empty. No additional vehicles entered during my observation. At approximately 3:10 a.m., I observed movement near the rest stop building. A figure emerged from the area adjacent to the restrooms and began walking across the parking lot. The individual moved at a consistent pace, following the painted lines that divided parking spaces. I watched through my side window. The figure maintained a straight trajectory across the lot, passing through areas of light and shadow. As it moved beneath one of the overhead fixtures, I observed specific details. The figure appeared to be a man of average height wearing what resembled work clothing. However, the clothing did not move naturally. There was no response to wind or gravitational effect. The fabric appeared static as if the image were frozen. The figure continued walking until it reached the far end of the parking lot, then turned and walked back along the same path. The movement was exact, following the identical route with no variation. I observed this pattern repeat 4 times over the next 20 minutes. Each circuit was identical in timing and trajectory. At 3:32 a.m., I started my engine and prepared to leave despite not completing my required rest period. As the engine turned over, the walking figure stopped mid-stride beneath one of the overhead lights. It remained motionless for approximately 5 seconds. Then it turned 90 degrees and faced my vehicle directly. The distance between my truck and the figure was approximately 100 feet. The overhead light provided clear illumination. I could see no facial features. The area where a face should have been appeared smooth and featureless. The figure did not move toward me. It remained stationary, facing my direction. I shifted into gear and exited the parking space. As I drove toward the rest stop exit, the figure remained in position, turning to follow my movement but not changing location. I merged back onto the interstate and continued driving. I reported the incident to my dispatcher at 6 a.m. during my next scheduled communication. The report was logged but generated no follow-up inquiry. 3 days later, I was assigned the same route. Upon approaching the rest area, I observed that it had been closed. Orange barriers blocked the entrance. A temporary sign indicated the facility was closed for maintenance. I contacted dispatch to report the closure. They confirmed that the rest area had been removed from their approved stop list 2 days earlier. No explanation for the closure was provided. I checked State Department of Transportation records. No maintenance was scheduled for that location. The facility had been operational without incident for 15 years. 2 months later, I drove past the location during daylight hours. The rest stop building had been demolished. The parking lot remained but was no longer striped or lit. A chain-link fence surrounded the perimeter. I submitted a Freedom of Information request for records related to the closure. The response indicated that the facility had been closed due to safety concerns, but provided no additional detail. Infrastructure inspection reports from the previous year showed no structural deficiencies or code violations. I spoke with 2 other drivers who had regularly used that rest stop. Both reported experiencing unusual observations during overnight stops, including vehicles disappearing from the lot and figures walking in repetitive patterns. Neither driver had reported these observations officially. Both had independently decided to avoid the location months before the closure. The rest stop remains closed. The lot is now used for storage of highway maintenance equipment. The building foundation is still visible but overgrown with vegetation. I no longer drive that route. I requested reassignment to different corridors and the company accommodated the request without requiring explanation. Approximately 1 year after the incident, I received an anonymous email to my company address. The message contained a single sentence: "You should not have watched it move." The email originated from an untraceable source. I reported it to my employer's security department. They found no evidence of system compromise and suggested it was spam that had bypassed filters. I retained the email in a separate folder. I have not received additional messages. The rest stop location is not marked on current GPS systems. The coordinates redirect to a point on the interstate with no exit listed. I continue to work as a commercial driver but now avoid overnight rest stops entirely. I schedule routes to align with daylight rest periods or use truck stops with consistent occupancy and security personnel. I have not observed similar phenomena at other locations. The walking figure remains vivid in memory. The absence of features, the static clothing, the precise repetition. I do not know what I observed that night. I do not know why the facility was closed immediately afterward. I do not know who sent the email or how they knew I had been present. The official record states only that the rest area was closed for safety reasons and subsequently demolished. No other explanation has been provided. Story 2: The office building on Lexington Street. I was employed as a night custodian for a commercial property management company from 2016 to 2020. My responsibilities included cleaning office spaces, restocking supplies, and performing minor maintenance tasks in buildings that were vacant during evening hours. One of my assigned locations was a 12-story office building on Lexington Street in the downtown business district. The building was constructed in 1985 and housed various corporate tenants including law firms, accounting practices, and consulting agencies. My shift at this location ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., Monday through Friday. I worked alone. The building was equipped with electronic access control, security cameras, and motion-activated lighting in common areas. Standard procedure required me to start on the top floor and work downward, completing each floor before descending to the next. This pattern ensured systematic coverage and allowed me to monitor the elevator as the only active point of vertical movement during my shift. The 12th floor housed a single tenant, a law firm that occupied the entire level. The space included approximately 30 offices, a conference room, a file storage area, and a reception desk near the elevator lobby. During my first 3 months working this location, I observed no irregularities on the 12th floor. The space remained vacant after business hours. Motion sensors triggered lighting when I entered each section, and lights deactivated after I moved to adjacent areas. In January of 2017, I began to notice inconsistencies. I would arrive on the 12th floor and observe lights already activated in sections I had not yet reached. Initially, I attributed this to sensor malfunction or delayed deactivation from the previous night's work. I reported the lighting issue to my supervisor. A maintenance technician inspected the system and found no defects. The sensors were functioning according to specifications. The pattern continued. Lights would be on when I arrived, suggesting motion had occurred in my absence. I began documenting which sections were illuminated upon my arrival. Over 2 weeks, I recorded 8 instances of unexplained activation, always in the same area, the corridor leading to the file storage room. On January 23rd, I arrived on the 12th floor at approximately 10:15 p.m. The corridor lights were on. I proceeded toward the file storage area to begin cleaning. As I approached, I heard a sound from inside the storage room. It resembled file cabinet drawers being opened and closed. The sound was mechanical and rhythmic, consistent with someone conducting a search through organized files. I stopped outside the storage room door. The sound continued for approximately 15 seconds, then ceased. I knocked on the door and announced my presence. No response. I opened the door. The room was empty. File cabinets lined 3 walls. All drawers were closed. No papers were disturbed. No person was present. I checked the room thoroughly, including behind cabinets and in the small closet where supplies were stored. Nothing was out of place. I exited and continued my work, checking the room twice more during my shift. It remained undisturbed. The following night, the same sound occurred at approximately the same time. Again, the room was empty when I investigated. This pattern repeated for 6 consecutive nights. Each time, the sound would begin shortly after I arrived on the 12th floor and would cease when I approached the door. On the 7th night, I decided to observe without announcing my presence. I positioned myself in an adjacent office with a partial view of the storage room door through an interior window. At 10:18 p.m., the sound began. I watched the door. It remained closed. The sound continued, clearly audible, emanating from inside the locked room. After approximately 30 seconds, the sound stopped. I waited an additional 2 minutes, then approached the door quietly. I opened it quickly, attempting to catch whatever was producing the sound. The room was empty as before. But this time, I noticed something different. One of the file cabinet drawers was open. It had been closed when I checked the room earlier that evening during my initial walkthrough. The open drawer belonged to a cabinet in the far corner of the room. I approached and examined the contents. The files appeared to be archived case documents, organized alphabetically. No files were out of position. I closed the drawer and left the room, locking it behind me. The next morning, I reported the incident to my supervisor. He contacted the law firm's office manager. They reviewed security camera footage. The cameras showed me entering and exiting the floor at recorded times. No other individuals appeared on any footage. The storage room was not covered by cameras due to client confidentiality requirements. The office manager suggested I might have been hearing sounds from the building's HVAC system, which serviced the file storage room through overhead ducts. I accepted this explanation but remained unconvinced. The sound was too specific, too mechanical to be attributed to airflow. I continued working the location. The file drawer sounds persisted 3 to 4 times per week, always between 10:15 p.m. and 10:30 p.m., always in the storage room. In March of 2017, I experienced a different phenomenon. I was cleaning offices on the 12th floor when I heard footsteps in the corridor behind me. The footsteps were distinct, dress shoes on tile flooring moving at a walking pace. I turned to look. The corridor was empty. The motion-activated lights showed no one present. The footsteps continued, moving past my location toward the reception area. I followed the sound visually, watching the corridor lights activate in sequence as if someone were walking through them. The footsteps reached the reception desk and stopped. I heard the sound of papers being moved, a chair rolling on plastic floor matting, then silence. I walked to the reception area. No one was present. Papers on the reception desk appeared undisturbed. The chair was positioned normally against the desk. I completed my work and left the floor earlier than usual. The following week, I experienced the footsteps again, this time accompanied by the sound of an office door opening and closing. The sequence was identical. Footsteps moving through the corridor, stopping at a specific office, door opening, brief pause, door closing, footsteps continuing. I attempted to determine which office the sounds originated from by following closely. Each time I approached, the sounds would cease before I could identify the specific location. In April, the phenomena escalated. I was cleaning a conference room when I heard voices. Not words, but the rhythm and intonation of conversation. Two distinct voices, one male, one female, speaking in turn as if engaged in discussion. The voices came from the corridor. I moved to the doorway to investigate. The corridor was empty, but the voices continued, moving slowly along the hallway as if the speakers were walking while talking. I followed at a distance. The voices maintained consistent volume and clarity but never formed recognizable words. The rhythm suggested professional discussion, question and response, with occasional pauses. The voices reached the end of the corridor and stopped. Silence followed. I stood alone in the empty hallway, attempting to rationalize what I had heard. I reported this incident to my supervisor with greater detail than previous reports. He arranged for a security company to conduct a sweep of the floor, checking for audio equipment, recording devices, or any technology that might produce the sounds I was experiencing. The sweep found nothing. The floor was clean. My supervisor suggested I request reassignment to a different building. I declined, partly out of professional pride and partly because I wanted to understand what was occurring. In May, I decided to conduct my own investigation. I researched the building's history and the law firm's background. I learned that the law firm had occupied the 12th floor since the building's opening in 1985. In 1994, 2 attorneys from the firm had died in a murder-suicide within the office space. According to archived news reports, the incident occurred after business hours in the file storage room. The details were limited. One attorney had shot a colleague before turning the weapon on himself. The motivations were described as related to a professional dispute over a case. The bodies had been discovered the following morning by administrative staff. Following the incident, the law firm had renovated the 12th floor, reconfiguring office layouts and updating finishes. They remained in the building, continuing operations without interruption. I did not share this information with my supervisor or the law firm. I continued working the floor, now understanding that the sounds and phenomena might be connected to the 1994 incident. The activity continued with increasing frequency. File drawer sounds, footsteps, voices, and occasional door movements became nightly occurrences. I learned to anticipate them, working efficiently and ignoring the disturbances as ambient noise. In August of 2017, I experienced the most significant incident. I was cleaning the file storage room at approximately 11:30 p.m. The room was well lit and I was working systematically through the space. I heard footsteps approaching from the corridor. They stopped outside the storage room door. I turned to look. Through the small window in the door, I observed a figure standing in the hallway. The figure was dark, silhouetted against the corridor lighting. I could not distinguish features, but the shape was consistent with a man wearing a suit. The figure remained stationary for approximately 10 seconds. Then it moved away, footsteps receding down the corridor. I opened the storage room door and looked into the hallway. Empty. Corridor lights were activated as if someone had passed through, but no person was visible. I completed my work and left the floor. That was my final shift at the Lexington Street building. I submitted a formal reassignment request the following morning, citing personal reasons. The request was approved. I was transferred to a different property within the week. I completed my employment with the property management company in 2020 and transitioned to different work unrelated to building maintenance. I occasionally drive past the Lexington Street building. It remains operational. The law firm still occupies the 12th floor. I do not know if my replacement experienced similar phenomena. I did not maintain contact with anyone from that position. The building's history is documented in public records. The 1994 incident is verifiable through archived news sources. The phenomena I experienced remain unexplained. I have not worked night shifts in commercial buildings since leaving that position. Story 3. The rental house on Birchwood Lane. In 2018, my wife and I relocated to a new city for her job opportunity. We needed temporary housing while searching for a permanent residence. A colleague of hers recommended a rental house on Birchwood Lane that was available for short-term lease. The house was a single-story structure built in the 1960s. It contained 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a combined living and dining area, and a detached garage. The property was situated on a corner lot in an established residential neighborhood. The landlord was an elderly woman who owned multiple properties in the area. She explained that the house had been vacant for approximately 4 months following the previous tenant's departure. She offered a reduced monthly rate for a 6-month lease with an option to extend. We signed the lease and moved in during the first week of June. The initial 2 weeks proceeded normally. We unpacked, established routines, and began familiarizing ourselves with the area. The house was quiet. Neighbors were present but not intrusive. The neighborhood felt safe and stable. In the third week, I began noticing minor irregularities. Objects would be in different locations than where I remembered placing them. A coffee mug would move from the kitchen counter to the dining table. Car keys would relocate from the entry table to the kitchen windowsill. I attributed this to the distraction of adjusting to a new environment. My wife reported similar experiences but also dismissed them as memory lapses. The pattern intensified. Items would be found in increasingly improbable locations. A book I was reading would appear in the bathroom. Kitchen utensils would be discovered in the bedroom. We began to suspect each other of moving items as a prank. We discussed it and both denied any intentional relocation of objects. In early July, we experienced our first significant incident. I was home alone on a Saturday afternoon. My wife was attending a work function. I was in the living room reading when I heard the bathroom door close. The bathroom was located at the end of a short hallway visible from the living room. I had not entered the bathroom recently. The door had been open when I sat down to read. I stood and walked to the hallway. The bathroom door was now closed. I approached and opened it. The bathroom was empty. The window was closed and locked from the inside. I searched the rest of the house. All exterior doors and windows were secured. I was alone. That evening, I mentioned the incident to my wife. She responded seriously, stating that she had experienced the bathroom door closing on its own twice during the previous week when home alone. We decided to monitor the situation more carefully. Over the next 2 weeks, the bathroom door closing became a regular occurrence. It would happen at various times, always when only one of us was home, always without explanation. We contacted the landlord to inquire about the door mechanism. She sent a handyman to inspect. He found nothing wrong with the door or frame. The hinges were level. There was no draft that would cause movement. The handyman suggested we keep the door propped open if it bothered us. We placed a doorstop. The door remained open for 3 days, then was found closed again with the doorstop moved to the other side of the hallway. In mid-July, we both experienced an incident that forced us to acknowledge the situation more seriously. We were sleeping in the main bedroom when we were awakened at approximately 3:20 a.m. by the sound of our bedroom door opening. Our bedroom door opened inward and produced a distinctive creak when moved. Both of us sat up immediately. The door was open approximately 12 inches. The hallway beyond was dark. I turned on the bedside lamp and got up to investigate. I checked the hallway, the other bedrooms, the bathroom, and the rest of the house. Everything was secure. No windows or doors had been opened. We closed the bedroom door and returned to sleep, though both of us remained alert for the rest of the night. The following evening, the same thing occurred at 3:20 a.m. The bedroom door creaked open approximately 12 inches. We checked again. Nothing. This pattern repeated for 6 consecutive nights. Each time at 3:20 a.m. Each time the door opened to the same degree. On the 7th night, we decided to remain awake and observe. We sat in bed with the lights off watching the door. At 3:20 a.m., the door began to open. Slowly, smoothly, without force or sound except the creak of the hinges. It opened to approximately 12 inches and stopped. We watched in silence. Nothing else occurred. The door remained open. I got up and examined the door and frame closely with a flashlight. No mechanism was visible. No strings or wires. No explanation. We left the door open and returned to bed. The following night, the door was closed when we went to sleep. At 3:20 a.m. we heard it open again. Same pattern. We contacted the landlord and requested a meeting. She came to the house the next day. We explained the phenomena. Objects moving, doors closing and opening on their own, the consistent 3:20 a.m. timing. She listened without interruption. When we finished, she was silent for several moments. Then she said, "The previous tenant mentioned similar things. That's why he left early." We asked why she hadn't disclosed this before we signed the lease. She stated that she didn't believe the previous tenant's reports and assumed he was fabricating excuses to break the lease without penalty. She had lived in the house herself for 3 years in the 1980s and experienced nothing unusual. We asked if anyone had died in the house. She confirmed that the original owner, her uncle, had died in the main bedroom in 1979. Natural causes. He had been elderly and in declining health. She suggested we could terminate the lease early if we were uncomfortable. She would waive the penalty and return our deposit. We considered the offer but decided to remain for the full 6 months as planned. We needed the time to find permanent housing, and breaking the lease would complicate our situation. We adapted our routines to accommodate the phenomena. We stopped using the main bedroom and moved to one of the smaller bedrooms. We kept doors propped open during the day. We documented each incident in a shared notebook. The activity continued but became predictable. Objects moved, doors opened and closed, always following the same patterns. The 3:20 a.m. bedroom door opening occurred nightly without variation. In October, we experienced a new development. I was alone in the house working from the dining table. My wife was at her office. It was approximately 2 p.m. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Distinct, measured footsteps on hardwood flooring. I stood and looked into the hallway. Empty. But the footsteps continued, moving from the hallway into the living room, then stopping near the front window. I walked to the living room. No one was present. The footsteps did not resume. This occurred 3 more times over the following week. Always when I was alone. Always the same route, hallway to living room, stopping at the front window. My wife experienced similar phenomena when alone, though her accounts described the footsteps moving from the living room to the main bedroom. In November, we found permanent housing and provided notice to the landlord. We vacated the Birchwood Lane house on November 30th, completing our 6-month lease. During our final walkthrough with the landlord, she asked if the phenomena had continued throughout our tenancy. We confirmed that they had. She mentioned that she had decided not to rent the house again for residential purposes. She planned to use it for storage. We asked if she believed our experiences were genuine. She stated that after speaking with us and the previous tenant, she could no longer dismiss the reports as fabrication. We moved into our new home. We experienced no unusual phenomena in the new location. 2 years later, we drove past Birchwood Lane. The house appeared vacant. The yard was overgrown. No vehicles were in the driveway. I checked county property records. The house remained owned by the landlord. No rental activity was listed. I contacted the landlord via email to inquire about the property's status. She responded that the house was being used for storage as planned and would likely remain unoccupied indefinitely. She concluded the email with a brief statement. Some places don't want to be lived in anymore. We did not respond. We have not returned to that neighborhood. The notebook we kept during our tenancy contains 127 documented incidents over 6 months. The entries are factual and time-stamped. We retain the notebook as a record. We have not discussed our experiences publicly until now. The house on Birchwood Lane remains standing. The rental listing was never reposted. We do not know what caused the phenomena we experienced. We do not know if activity continues in our absence. The original owner died in the house over 40 years ago. Whether that fact is connected to our experiences remains unknown. We completed our 6-month lease. We documented what we observed. We moved on. The bedroom door opened at 3:20 a.m. every night without fail for 4.5 months. We never determined why. Thank you to everyone who shared their experience. Grateful to everyone who opened up about what they lived through. Your bravery fuels this channel. The unexplained doesn't wait for acceptance. It arrives uninvited. These weren't flukes or random chance. They were genuine experiences. Something you can't rationalize. If you've experienced something you can't explain, share it through email. Hit like if you enjoyed today's pick and let me know which one shook you the hardest. Reality has cracks. See you next time. Till then, it's your storyteller Andrew signing off.